Hello, I'm recording this video on the 23rd of December 2024, and so we're fast approaching the celebration of Christmas this year. And I thought I would do this Christmas special, if you like, to talk to you about this Jesus who is born on the 25th of December and who we hope to meet. Scriptures are very interesting in giving us a real picture of who Jesus is. And we find both him and Mary come through as very real characters when we read especially the Gospel of St. Luke that deals obviously with the infancy narratives. And there are many interesting facets to this birth of Jesus for us. First of all, when the angel appears to Mary to announce to her that she is to become the mother of God, we see a very practical person in Mary who doesn't go into all sorts of, oh no, not me, I'm not worthy, but merely said, if that's what the calling is, how is that going to be? Because of the difficulty of not being in a married relationship, for example, in this case. Also, we see a very practical Mary in that hearing not only the annunciation of her own pregnancy, but that of her cousin Elizabeth, who was of a certain age and was in her 6th month already, Mary immediately abandons what she was busy doing and makes haste to go and visit her cousin to help her in those last months of her pregnancy. And as I say, a very practical Mary, a person very like people of the country are, that when something needs doing, they get down and do it. We also see a very interesting thing in the life of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. Because, sometimes things happen in life to good people or those we see as being good people, and we say they didn't deserve that. But if we see even the very birth of Jesus came at a very inopportune time for Mary and Joseph, not only were they traveling when Mary was 9 months pregnant, but they couldn't find accommodation in the inn, and so ended up having to accept the only lodgings they could find, which were in a stable. And so we see even those most dear to God, most close to God, don't have everything their way. There's also the fact that quite often families will say, well, is it really that important that we fulfill all the rituals and rites that our religion has always fulfilled? And if there was ever a family who could have said, well, we don't really need religion, we don't need their rites and their ways of doing things, it would have been Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And yet they do exactly that. They follow their tradition. They go and they present Jesus in the temple. They have him circumcised and so on. And so they follow the rites of their religion as Jesus does as an adult when we find him reading and preaching in the synagogue. And so, as I say, we find a very practical Mary. But also we find a Jesus who is born into a difficult situation. We talk about not deserving something, and Mary and Joseph certainly didn't deserve to have to escape from their country, flee to Egypt in order to protect the life of Jesus in infancy, and only return after Herod had died and that threat had passed. We also see a very personal, very normal personal mother-son relationship between Mary and Jesus. As we know, when Jesus was 12, they went to Jerusalem for the Passover, and Jesus remained behind. And Mary had no trouble telling him that he'd done wrong when she reproved him for having stayed behind and not come back with them straight away. We also see a very lovely picture of a mother and adult son and how that relationship often works out at the wedding in Cana in Galilee when Jesus performed his first miracle. When Mary goes to him and says, they've run out of wine. And Jesus basically says, well, what's that got to do with me? My hour hasn't come yet. And Mary simply turns to the servants and says, do whatever he tells you to do. And as far as we know, goes away and just leaves it between the servants and Jesus to be sorted out. We also know that Jesus was regarded by people in his village as a carpenter. He was seen as a very normal person. And this is why I have to say that in my own case, I don't usually enjoy biblical films. And I think it's a bit because it's like seeing someone that you know and love being depicted, but knowing that something is not what that person is. Because most often in biblical films, Jesus arrives as this person who physically is already striking, and everyone is in awe of as soon as he's on the scene. But this is not the Jesus that we meet in the scriptures. We know that on many occasions when he performed miracles, or at the time of his transfiguration, he said to those present, "Don't tell anyone about this until the Son of Man has risen." And he said so because the people at the time would not have been able to accept this sort of Messiah. They thought the Messiah was going to come in power and glory, and very often we still expect that. And so this rather normal man who lived a very human life appears, and they would have had great difficulty accepting him as the Messiah they should have waited for. But just as they were expecting the incorrect person, it often happens in our culture that we too focus so on the power and glory of Christ. And if that was the intention of God, he would have sent myriads of angels to support Jesus, to make people understand how important he was, and so on. But what shows the importance to him of our humanity is that he sent Jesus in human form like us, without all that pomp and ceremony. He sent him to live a normal life like most of us live for most of his life. And this is the Jesus that we are meant to meet, the Jesus who loves us in our humanity, the Jesus who loves you in your humanity, the Jesus who's here for us not as someone so way above us that we could never possibly understand or have a relationship with him, but as another person that we are meant to relate to one-on-one. Jesus' coming is particularly striking because it is so complete. And without trying to take anything away from the event, one example I could use is the example of when we see footage of the Pope going to visit prisoners in prison in Rome at Christmas. And this is a lovely thing to see, and indeed is a very good thing. However, without, as I say, trying to take anything away from the gesture, the Pope goes as the Pope. He is dressed as the Pope, speaks to the prisoners as the Pope, and leaves as the Pope. But when Jesus came, he fully immersed himself in our humanity, that he was unrecognizable as anyone but a human to those who did not know him, to those who did not come to know him and get to realize who he really was. And he stayed in that form even when it cost him his life. He stayed in our form. And this is how important our humanity is to God, and how much he wants us to relate to him on that level, in those terms. And so my prayer for you and your loved ones at this Christmas is that you may come to know Christ more fully as he really is at this Christmas time and in this new year to come. God bless you.